I'm Nicholas Love, Chief Executive Officer with the Kulur Group, and welcome to another episode of With Love podcast. Joining me today is a dynamic dope thinker in every sense of the definition, Chelsea C. Williams, founder and CEO of Reimagine Talent, and Lord knows it's been a long time getting you here, but certainly we've known each other in a variety of different lives leading up to this point. But I mean, first and foremost, thank you so much for joining me today.
So happy to be here, Nick.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's get into you, right? And certainly I believe that, nobody tells their story quite the way they do, right? So first up, who is Chelsea Williams?
Oh my goodness. A daughter, a sister, a friend, a partner, a employer, a mentee, a mentor, a woman of God. So many different things make up my story. A helper, a connector, a woman of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, an HBCU graduate, a North Carolina native and resident, and lived in Harlem. So much is a part of my story.
Yeah, and I'm glad you answered it like that because one of the more influential people that I've been observing from afar is a woman by the name of Linda Gonzalez, and she's a behavioral psychologist at the University of Chicago Booth School of Business, right? And growing up, you hear so often we're shaped by the experiences we have in life, right? And one of the things that she talked about in her book called Choosing Leadership is that there's a difference between experiences and happenings, right? It only becomes an experience if you've processed it. If you don't process it, then it just is something that happened to you. And would love to hear in terms of all of the things that you just really unpacked, right? How have those collective sets of experiences shaped you into who you are today?
Oh my goodness, Nick, and you know this because we have some similarity. It's everything, right?
Yeah.
It shapes the way that I lead. It shapes the way that I think about purpose.
Mm.
It shapes the way that I think about legacy. It's everything. I mean, it is the foundation. Pulling from my past experience, my family experience, my formative years, my education. And then just some of these special experiences like going to an HBCU and then starting my career in New York City, leaving the South, but then experiencing the Big Apple and being nuanced enough to connect in both.
Yeah.
It's everything.
Yeah, yeah. So let's get into your pathway into your journey, right? Like, how does one end up as the founder and CEO of Reimagine Talent, right? Because certainly entrepreneurship, it's the sexy buzzword of 2026, 2025, 2024. And, some days, it's it, and some days it ain't it, right? But anyhow, that's another conversation. But let's talk about your collective set of experience, right? Before launching your company, you spent about a decade working in global HR on Wall Street, right? Looking back at that experience, how did it shape how you lead and how you've built your own business today?
Love the question. I like to start by saying I was one of the few people who intentionally chose the HR path. I know it's so interesting because there's so much thoughts about this space. But before I went to Spelman, my senior year at Southeast Raleigh Magnet High School, I did a job shadow. I was always passionate, Nick, about the intersection of business and people, business and psychology. I was like, how do you navigate? I love the world of business. I'm intrigued by it, but the people piece was always what I was interested in. So, then I go to Spelman, I study economics, but I do a minor in management and organization. And I'm just like, okay, the people side of business is where I want to lead my career. I had no idea that entrepreneurship would be my path. I actually thought one of two things. I said, well, if it's a great company with a great mission, I could be the head of people and culture. Or I said to myself, I could also go and lead a foundation, like truly like head of social responsibility or something like that, because I do very much care about the world and people. And so when entrepreneurship was really presented to me as a pathway. And this is really through those experiences at Spelman and those experiences in the Jackie Robinson Foundation that paid my way through school. And I was meeting entrepreneurs and they were telling about their journey and their story. And then when I got to Wall Street and realized I learned so much there, the experience was transformative, but I saw some opportunities to solve some issues or be a part of creating opportunity there. I said, well, you know what? I don't have to constrain myself to this corporate path. I saw some real opportunities to do talent differently. And I think as a Black woman, one of 2% of Black women at my firm, of thousands, these days the term is like under question, but the inclusivity and this concept about representation and belonging and really building from your lived experience and lens, it was through stepping out and saying, you know what, I'm going to give it a try. And for me, that try was actually a consulting gig at Teach for America in adult learning and leadership. And I really didn't say that I automatically left Wall Street to start a company. I said, let me do something different for a season. Let me put my skills to use in a new industry and sector in this mission-driven space. And I was like, let me try it. And you know what? If I don't end up enjoying this, I'll go back. And I had a lot of Black and non-Black executives at my firm say, if you're going to try it now. Because if you stay here and then life happens and family happens, it's harder for you to leave. And they were very honest with me about that. So I said, let me just take this opportunity. A 3-month consulting contract opportunity turned into an extension of 6 months supporting them as a consultant. And then I was like, I really enjoy the variety of this work. Can I actually make something of this? And literally, 9-12 months in, the traction started to slowly happen. And I said, well, I'm going to give this a try. Let's create an LLC in Harlem, in New York City. And so that was really my story, not necessarily what I intended or knew would be the fruit of the effort, but it's definitely changed my life.
Let me tell you what I hear when you say that, right? I hear recognition of transferable skills. I hear faith.
For sure.
And I hear a listening ear.
Mm.
And when you say, I want to explore doing talent differently
Mhm.
in 2026, what does that mean now to you?
Gosh. It means so much. It means we have had a structure of how we have worked organizations for decades. We have had, and this was one of the things that we considered talking about, this method that you go into an organization, you keep your head down, you do your work well, and things will just transpire for you and you will be promoted and you will live the quote unquote American dream. And to be honest with you, it's interesting. From our perspective, we know that has not been the case.
Right.
But the reality is, generationally, that actually did work. You go to a company and you stay there for some time and they take good care of you, and that is enough for you to live a happy life. But I think, I started my career on Wall Street after the 2008 economic downturn. So actually, I often say that God was showing me then so much more that I actually understood as like a bubbly 22-year-old out of Spelman. But I remember, Nick, being in Giles Hall at Spelman College and the seniors running around like, we got our offers reneged. And, they had these full-time jobs and internships, and then it was just pulled out of nowhere. And that was the precursor for me going to work at Barclays, after the Lehman crash, and seeing in the HR role this uncertainty that ended up impacting the organization, but also the people who worked there. So for me, it's like, okay, we're going through something now that's different, but this similar piece of change, disruption, uncertainty, and what's necessary for people to be able to stand on their own. And I do hope we talk about that in a bit, but also that organizations have to, I believe, consider in this world of productivity and performance, the human side of work, if they actually want to get the best out of people.
Yeah, no, you mentioned in 2008 took me back because I mean, as you were talking about, you being at Spelman, I was actually working, and I was, and I'll be very transparent. I was working at ESPN as an on-air talent, and I'll never forget one of
Wow.
my. He was, Mr. James Penny, the late Mr. James Penny is one of my
Mhm.
mentors, and he told me, he said, "You shouldn't go work there." And I said, "Hold on, wait, what?" He said, "No, you shouldn't go work for ESPN." And I'm like, "Well, this is my dream job. Like, why not?" And he said something to me then that was so profound. He said, "You never want to start where you want to finish. You never want to start where you want to finish, right?" And it was interesting in terms of hearing you talk about, yeah, for our generation, kind of keeping your head down and staying at the same place and thinking that they're going to take care of you, right? Like that has been met with a little bit more resistance than generations previously, right? And I learned very early, and I want to say 23,
Mm,
uh, that one of the models at the places at the place that I was working at was, well, they have a tendency to value financially talent coming from other places, because if you grow up in this particular area,
sure.
they're going to be thinking of you as you have been homegrown, and not to the point where they don't appreciate you, right? But the financial validation that you might get from other places, because they see that they're interested in what you bring from that experience, right? It's compromised, right? And so, when we talk about doing talent differently, at least from our perspective in 2026, it is recognizing that we are now in a culture that there's a hustle culture,
Mhm.
there is the fractional culture, right? That we live in, and to your earlier point, in terms of entities seeing the human outside of just the position, right? Humans have complex needs, they
Absolutely.
have complex desires, right? And for today's leader, it behooves you to allow your staff or employer, however you want to title them, the opportunity to pursue those desires within your respective organization. That's when you're starting to see people bring their holistic self to work.
Right.
When I
I,
say that to you, does that make sense?
sure, absolutely. It absolutely makes sense. But it requires a reframe it from traditional structures of work. It requires, and I really feel like we are at a reckoning right now as
Mm,
we think about artificial intelligence, as we think about the speed of technology. I mean, we've talked about this. We are business owners. Please believe we leverage AI um, as a tool and a system for us to be able to work more efficiently, but also believe that we are in touch with when we're using that tool and when Chelsea and Nick are showing up as ourselves in relation with people and building what transparently AI would never be able to do. And that is the human connection, that is the trust factor, okay, that people want when it comes to the kind of work we do. That's another
sure.
part of this. So I do think that the conversation right now um, requires us to consider what worked then may not work now. Here's another news flash. Maybe your journey through career was amazing and you saw it one way and it's what you believe other people should do or navigate through. We're living in a different time now. So even I think about when we give advice to people, when we give, support resources to people, I always say, here was my journey and my experience, but please tap into what is necessary and relevant to you now because it's a different age. There are different resources available, there are different pressure points. And for me to consider that my journey needs to be your journey, it is just not being realistic to where we are today and what people are navigating. So I think that those are really important, even in leadership conversations, that we are meeting people where they are and we are supporting them where they are, but helping them get to that next level that we are all figuring out right now. And so
Yes.
that's where the transparency, the adaptability, the humility, every single day is what we need to, as people who call ourselves leaders, be leaning into because we don't know it all right now. And I think that there's trust built in saying, we're trying it, we're shifting and pivoting and jiving and all the things that are necessary, but we're staying committed to mission. And I think that people can get behind that.
Let me ask you this, because Color Group as an agency, we work with a variety of challenger brands, right, that are ultimately trying to disrupt their industries. And there's a variety of ways in which you do that. But from a people and culture perspective, what do organizations need to get right if they want to grow without losing their humanity?
What do they need to get right now? One of the things that I talk a lot about, and this, are generations at work. Okay. Because we, again, are at this massive shift that is on the horizon. You've probably heard year 2030 and some of the real generational dynamics that are going to shift at that point. 25% of baby boomers retiring, 30% of the workforce being Gen Z. Gen X, I haven't forgot about you. Gen X moving into those leadership roles as they really are, that next band. Okay. And then millennials, we're in the mix too. But I think, last week I was in downtown Raleigh with a group of people and culture executives across the state. And I was talking about how you prepare your organization for the leadership shifts and changes that are coming. And one of the things that became very clear to me as I asked for folks to raise their hand with a question was, do you know the generational dynamics of your workforce right now? That was question A. Do you know the breakdown from boomer to Z? And then my second question was, how is your organization preparing that succession and knowledge transfer? Okay, that needs to start now. Because, and I say this often, I am not sure that we are prepared holistically for what will happen if we're not intentional about the knowledge transfer from boomers. And so I think that organizations are not considering the leadership shift that is on the horizon and the intentional investment in the next generation of leaders from a knowledge standpoint, from a proximity standpoint, and from an understanding of how culture needs to change or evolve, if that's a more digestible word, to meet the values and interests of people today. Because it's different.
What do you think is the biggest misunderstanding that you see between like Gen Z and more experienced professionals?
Yeah.
And let me just layer this on top of that question. And what are some of the biggest strengths that you see in the next generation of leaders as well?
Love that question. So we actually have gone all across the country. We have engaged 3,000 plus people leaders and Gen Zers to understand values drivers as it relates to work and career. And I can tell you, probably not to surprise, the biggest challenges are one, value preferences. Okay. What folks want out of work, the employer-employee contract, which we talked a little bit about that, my expectation about what an employer does for me and what I do for an employee, for an employer, that contract is different. Okay, for across the board it's different, but when you add in younger generations, older generations, it's different. And then when you add in values, what do I want out of work? I'm not going to generalize, but a lot of times we will see younger generations not default to compensation.
Yes.
Okay. Default to maybe purpose and alignment and mission. Default to learning and growth and opportunities to build skills. Okay. That kind of stuff is huge for this generation. And honestly, Nick, we see it across the board, across ethnicity, gender, socioeconomic status. And so I really think there's something there.
What is it about Gen Z that you think is a myth that needs to be debunked?
That they don't want to work. And let me tell you, because I find myself in these incredibly interesting conversations. We have a contract with the largest county in North Carolina, and it's been a workforce development related contract. And we've enjoyed it. And this is actually intentional for my company, that even though we do a lot of manager and leader development, we have not moved our connection to the next generation, because Nick, they're going to be the ones who will step into management. And so we want to be proximate to their ability to prepare for career and to do it well, because that continues our ability to make impact. That's how I look at it. So we've been working with some early talent across the county. And prior to us working with them, a couple of folks were like, they don't engage. They'll be on their phones. Bah, 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 bah. And so we did this series of trainings, but also career exploration with healthcare, cybersecurity, and entrepreneurship. Nick, I didn't see a phone in sight, except the end of the session when they had to do the post survey. They were locked in. They were asking questions. They were engaged. You know, the director said this is the first time. The educators would be shocked if they saw them this engaged, right? That's not necessarily a flag to my company, but what I learned in that experience was that if we meet them where they are, if we take the time to understand what intrigues them and how they appreciate and value learning, if we bring them something outside of the norm, which historically is lecture, but no engagement and ability to get practical and hands-on, if we make sure that the people who are speaking are representative of them and their experiences, whether that is communities of color as one example, or immigrants, or first generation, or college grads, whatever the demographic is, if we meet them where they are and they can see hope, they actually have a lot to offer. And I tend to find, last comment, that the people who have the most to say about this generation are actually not proximate to them. This is not to say that there are not some areas of opportunity navigating post-COVID and some of the realities of social media. I'm not defending them and saying that those aren't real things that need to be worked at. But the conversation they don't want to work, that is dangerous. And we need to seek to find out how we can meet them where they are and provide them hope towards their futures.
So I would love to get your feedback here, because you've talked about the transfer of leadership, and when there's a transfer of leadership, there's always going to be friction. Oh, well, we didn't do that, back in the day we did it this way, right? And so forth. And so it always happens. um, but in your opinion, what's the number one skill that a leader needs today to not suck?
I love the candor. Well, since I have to give you one, it really is this conversation around caring.
Okay.
What do leaders need? What do humans need? Care. What's the strategy? Care. Some might put a fancy bow and call it empathy and understanding. Right now, as we're speaking, we got an alert that we are having severe, potentially tornado weather in the Carolinas, which right? And so I obviously was coming in from Atlanta from a weekend with some friends, and I saw the notification, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm checking in with my folks. I'm checking in and making sure I'm good to go, make sure they're good to go. And then I'm like, well, I have a team as well, a small but mighty team, but I'm like, they're around the state. And one in particular who was very close by. And so at first I'm like, I'm gonna be very honest. At first I'm like, okay, well, she checks the news. She'll let me know if she needs it. I know about her, she's children and all this kind of stuff. So I'm like, all right, she'll let me know if she needs anything, but we'll be business as usual, but we'll be monitoring. I thought it in my head, and then it wouldn't leave me. And a couple hours into the evening, I'm like, just send her a text, just check in, make sure, I know, I'm sure you've heard the news, or maybe you haven't heard the news. This is coming. Just want to make sure you and the fam are good. Tomorrow, let's stay close. If we need to shift things, we can. Her response, oh my gosh, thank you so much for acknowledging and for checking in with me. I just really appreciate it. About the kids and school canceled, and this just gives me ability to breathe. Thank you. And, she was up bright and early supporting the things that we need to get done. But she mentioned to me just that check-in alone about well-being, caring, was enough for her to get behind what we have to do. Cause it's like, well, this person cares about me more than a product.
Yeah.
And again, I was in my head as a leader, like, I'm sure she's fine. Like, she knows my heart. But sometimes we have to be the ones to model and just to take that step out, just to show in the most basic, I think, ways. And then it helps to build that trust that's necessary later. I hope that that's a good example.
That was a phenomenal example. I guess, let me follow that up. For an established leader of today, where do they go wrong with care not coming out naturally with today's generation?
Well, I do believe that sometimes, and I catch myself in this too, there can be the thought that if I am holding space for empathy and care, and be honest, some may say when I open that can, you're telling me everything about your family and your personal life, and it gets blurred, and I know about this and I know about that, and I don't really want to know. And that's it's a real thing. I've been there, and I've had to learn from that, Nick. I'm gonna be very honest with you. So sometimes there's just the fear of, if we start to get into all of this, I don't want my team to think that I'm a friend, or I'm, just someone they can come to and take advantage of, and then we're not productive.
Yeah.
And that is why, and I will say, that's why those conversations do need to happen early about, here are my expectations. Here's what accountability looks like. Yes, I care for you, but we are still here to fulfill a mission and to serve our partners and our clients. Here's what I can do and where we can bend and flex, but here's where it's tough for me to do that, and why. And I tend to find that those kind of conversations, along with feedback, I've
Mm,
learned over the years that feedback, and we've had these conversations, it needs to be direct and clear and timely.
yes.
And it needs to be communicated. I even say this sometimes when I have to give challenging feedback. It's like, I care about you. This is not personal to you, but this is important for you to know, and here's why.
Yes.
And then giving them a moment to say, do you get it? Do you understand? If you need to sit with it, ask me questions, let me know. But here's why I'm calling this out, not to pick at, but to let you know, if we don't get this right now, when there's an expanded opportunity and we don't have room for margin to get it wrong, it's magnified. So let's get it right now.
That's real. Let me pick that mic up that you just dropped. I love it. I love it. Um, Two last questions for you. Number one, would love to know what you do the most with love.
Say it one more time, Nick.
What do you do the most with love?
Well, I'm trying to now harness love more, and realizing that love is myself, loving self, loving others, loving God's creation. And I know it sounds very cheesy, but over the past couple of years, I've had to go back to the basics in terms of love is around me, love is in me, love is to be offered to me, and for me to be able to accept and receive from those who I get to do life with. And so that's how I really look at it. But it's a daily experience to see it around me and not think that it's so far fetched to receive.
Yeah. And who's a dope thinker that you know that many may not know? And what makes them a dope thinker?
Oh, a dope thinker. Well, I'm thinking about my grandmother. She passed away a couple of years ago, and she is she really is the example of entrepreneurship. She had a market and village. She was born and raised in Freetown in West Africa, and she was the local market. She had a local market where she served her community in downtown, and she came from humble beginnings, a British father and a Sierra Leonean mother, and she, despite her background and her experiences and her challenges, was able just to serve people. And I didn't actually realize this until a couple of years ago, that DNA was in me, passed down from my grandmother. And so she is just the light of my life. I love her as well as my mom, but she was my example of entrepreneurship and of doing hard things, but doing it for the benefit of others. And so I love her so much. And this podcast, I'm going to devote to her.
All right. Well, in the nearly 30 minutes that we've been talking, I hear purpose, I hear peace, and I hear present. Right. Those are three things that clearly are on display with Miss Chelsea C. Williams. Thank you so much for joining me today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Nick, and all the best to you and the team. I so respect you and the work that you are doing across the globe, and I'm continuing to cheer you on.
Thank you so much. If people want to find you, where can they find you?
Yep. Best place for me is LinkedIn, Chelsea C. Williams. If you include that C, you will find me. You can also learn more about my company at reimaginetalentco.com.
There we go. All right. Well, I look forward to the next conversation with you. And I'm sending you nothing but blessings and positive thoughts and energy your way because you are very impactful and very creative and a joy to have a conversation with. So you
Thank you
take
so
care.
much, Nick. Right back at you.